have informal session today. Three items: levy discussion, Clermont County Board of Developmental Disabilities, a levy discussion with Clermont Senior Services, and then a review of the capital budget with Suki Sheets. So we'll start with Developmental Disabilities. Dan Ottke. Ottke. Pronunciation. Dan Ottke.
All right.
You're on.
All right. Thank you. Well, good morning.
Morning.
It's good to see everybody this morning. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes just catching everyone up related to back in July, had the opportunity to present related to some of our levy requests, looking at our finance, talking with our finance committee, our board, et cetera. So just wanted to kind of catch you all up as to where we are and where things stand at this point now that we're heading into October. And answer any questions that you might have related to things related to our levy. So first off, back in July, I just wanted to spend a couple minutes. I shared this forecast with you back in July. That's right when the state budget had been passed, but we didn't really know kind of what the outcome of some things were going to be. And I also wanted to take a minute, I should take a minute also to say thank you, and also mention, I forgot to mention, we do have a couple of folks with us today from our board. Rex just walked in, Rex Parsons, our board president, Greg Carson, who is one of our board members, and then David Sininger, who is our
money guy.
Yeah, the money guy, exactly. So he gets to put this together here. So this is what he put together for us for the finance committee to spend some time looking at. One of the things that's different from back in July was, if you see the numbers here, you see some things zeroing out as we kind of go out. These are tangible personal property and electric dereg. We had some inkling that was coming out of the state budget process, but that hadn't been confirmed back in July. But now it has been confirmed, so we do know that's something where we will see those numbers start to zero out as we head out of 2016, 17, 18, 19. So that obviously impacts things in relation to you see the numbers there. All told, it's about $320 some odd $1,000 that will go away. And certainly the numbers that start to make us, when we start to look at the numbers down here at the bottom, at the ending balances as of 2016, 2017, and certainly when we get into 18 and 19, those are the numbers that our finance committee looks at and says, okay, well, we got to do some things here. We got to take a look at it in terms of what we're going to do in terms of impacting that. So certainly that's where we have spent the majority of our time looking at, okay, well, what are we going to do to address those numbers? What I'll go forward with is to spend some time looking at our levies. I shared this back in July. As you recall, we have 4 continuing levies. So we have levies that were passed in 1977, 1979, 1980, and also one in 1976. Back in 2010, you see the levy here in 1976 and 2010. This continuing levy was replaced, so that goes back about 5 years ago, and so that certainly impacted things in relation to our revenue. But since then, we have had no additional revenue brought forth. So what we started to look at is, okay, well, what can we do to address that? So we spent some time looking at the other 3 continuing levies, and it also, as you recall, we have a 5-year operating levy. So that was passed back in 2003. It was just most recently renewed in 2013. But one of the things that we look at is certainly these older levies in terms of their effective rates. So if you look at some of these effective rates, certainly on the residential side, back 35, 36 years ago, they were at a 0.4 voted millage rate. But since then, you can see these numbers here, how they've dropped pretty dramatically. The 1 mil is now at a 0.36 effective rate. The 0.4 is at 0.09. Not as dramatically impacted on the commercial side, but certainly, as you can see, that's what we've been looking at there. So when we look at potential revenue and kind of where to seek that, we looked at all three of the other continuing levies to say, okay, well, what can we do in terms of increasing revenue? And the Finance Committee and Board looked at the 1 mil and the 0.4 mil continuing levies to say, okay, maybe we should take a look at those. And so if you see increase in revenue if replaced, and we're talking about looking at replacing these, the total revenue generated from replacing those two levies would be about $3.4 million annually. So if you go back to our forecasts here and you look at some of the deficit in terms of the expenditures, revenues, certainly that would close that gap. Now, one of the things that this forecast does not take into account at all is anything new. So this is, and what I'll do is as I go into the presentation further, one of the difficult decisions that our board had to make back at the beginning of this year was to look at the fact that based on where things were headed, the decision was to freeze any new services off the waiting lists. So it was to really look at, okay, let's maintain, but certainly we have to make a difficult decision here related to what we do with any new services. So this forecast actually takes in nothing. There is nothing to reflect anything new. This is just as if things stood still. And the challenge with that is you just don't know if that's feasible based on need. So one of the things we have to look at is the fact that things are always changing with the population that we're serving in terms of the need. And in order for us to look at that, we have to say, okay, is that reasonable to look at? But we wanted to make sure the forecast kind of reflected that. So if you look at that, the revenue generated again would be about $3.4 million annually. So moving forward, I did want to share some actions that we took to address the forecast. In 2013, I've shared this with you before in the past. The board recognized the fact, well, where is there some capacity maybe we don't have to, we meaning the board directly, potentially have to provide the service directly. And one of the areas that we looked at was our adult services program, which we, at one point, way back in about 2009, were serving about 225 to 230 individuals in our programs that were actually county-run programs. But one of the things we recognized was that there was some capacity in the private sector to be able to do that for some of the individuals that we serve. So started looking at diligently back in 2013 to say, okay, well, what might we be able to do to address potentially offsetting or looking at the private sector providing some of these services for individuals so that we wouldn't maybe directly have to provide those services in-house. And ultimately what that meant is we could actually do some reduction in terms of our overall staffing numbers. So that was the better part of a year. We announced that back at the end of 2013, and we gave individuals and their families an opportunity to spend all of 2014 to seek out private sector services, and we helped them through that process. The good news is that everybody found a service in the community, and everybody is being served, so that's a good thing. And we're very excited about that because that's not the easiest thing to do. Certainly developing and building that capacity in our private sector, but we were very lucky to have a couple of providers that were able to increase their capacity. So ultimately what that meant is we were able to reduce our overall number of staff from 189 and a half to 159. Certainly we're able to reduce by a building.
You're talking about your workshop?
Yes, the workshop. Yes, workshop services. So yeah, these are services, day services for adults. Yeah, so we had...
Yeah, you notice I didn't say sheltered workshop.
Yeah, and there's a lot changing in that world. So, and that's something else we're keeping a close eye on because in terms of overall services for individuals with developmental disabilities, community integrated services is critical, and that's where we're headed, not only for ourselves, but also working with our private sector providers as well. So we're able to reduce by one building. So we're working on trying to kind of work through that in terms of looking at potentially selling one of our buildings. And then in 2015, like I mentioned earlier, we had to put a freeze on offering any new services off of our waiting lists. And certainly when we do that, that has an impact on the people that we serve, their families. But we recognize the fact that we, just had to make some difficult decisions. And the reality is that if we had to do that in 2015, you can probably guess we have to look at doing that in 2016 as well as we talk with the board, because we're still in a place that we're, our forecasts look in that way. So we're essentially looking at the same path heading into 2016. We meet with our board on Thursday to talk and really kind of flesh that out for 2016, but to have those discussions further. So those were some of the actions that we've taken to address that. So you might ask the question, okay, well, if these new funds come to fruition that we would be seeking through replacing two of our continuing levies, well, what does that actually mean for services for people in the community? While this is not a comprehensive list of that, this is certainly a pretty good list of letting you know kind of what it is that individuals in our community receive when they're receiving services from the Clermont County Board of Developmental Disabilities. So you look at early intervention and school age services. And the other thing I want to share with this is everything you see in this list, there is a local dollar that goes into everything that you see on this list. Now, what we really try and do as much as we possibly can is try to leverage maybe some federal dollars if we can to be able to provide these services. But every time we leverage that federal dollar, it is something that we have to put a local match into it. So that's something that we're always trying to strive to do, and we do that pretty frequently through some of our Medicaid waiver programs and things of that sort. But everything you see on this list, there is a local dollar that goes into each one of these services. So we can start from the very top with the early intervention program, and I'm going to share. I'm going to share some stories, just a little bit about kind of what this means, so I think it kind of brings it home in terms of these services. Last time I was here, I shared a lot of numbers, so I kind of went through a lot of waiting list numbers and things of that sort. They can be a little sterile, but certainly one of the things I'm going to share is as we go through, I'm going to show you a life map a little bit about kind of how we touch individuals and families from the time that they're born until the time that they die in some form or fashion as we go through the life map. So again, early intervention and school age services, full-time residential and day supports, and this includes transportation. So these are services that individuals are receiving in, for lack of a better term, maybe a group home, but also these are day supports that people are receiving. Maybe they live at home with their families, but they also maybe go somewhere during the day to receive some day supports. Drop-in supports in the home. We serve a number of individuals in the community. They have a lot of independence, but they also need some assistance to be able to maintain that independence. So while we don't provide that directly, what we're doing is working with local providers in our community to be able to provide those services for the people in the community that need those supports. Again, vocational and day supports. So if you see here, again, these are the services that people are receiving either every day. So some people actually go to a place every day to receive a service, or what we oftentimes we are very committed to is supporting people in working in the community. So that's a huge thing that here in Clermont County that we are supportive of, is providing those supports for the people in our community that want to work. And so we will oftentimes, we're doing a lot of upfront work with those individuals and then providing some follow-along supports for them as they continue on their job. A couple big things here that we started recognized probably 3 or 4 years ago was sometimes there's individuals and families that are on waiting lists for maybe a more grander service in terms of more supports, maybe 24-hour supports, things of that sort. But they might have a need that's right now that they just say, if there's something that I could get right now to help with this particular need, it would go a long way. And so what we recognized was that we put some local funds into help supporting some individuals and family with things like respite, assistance with summer care. There are so many instances in which, and I hear the stories all the time in terms of, families, they have to work, they have to do the things that they need to be able to get by, but in the summer or during weekends, things of that sort, where they need a little bit extra help, these are the services that provide that for them. And so while it's not maybe a lot of money that goes into those, I can tell you, and I'll share a story from a mom that she shared an email with me where it goes a long way. And so these are the services that we were very excited to be able to offer, and quite frankly would be difficult to maybe continue if we weren't able to look at how we can look at our revenue situation.
Would the summer care be like Camp Allen?
Yes, it would be something like Camp Allen. There are some instances in which kids go to just local daycares, things of that sort. And it just helps with being able to provide this care and this assistance for families that are in need of it. So.
Dan, do any of these services, is this something we do because it's the right thing, or is this something that the Ohio Revised Code tells us the county has to provide?
Yeah, these are what we feel are certainly the right thing to do. Certainly, it's a situation in which we look at mandated services. Certainly, none of these services would be considered mandated, but they are services that when we recognize, especially when we get into situations where families are in a very difficult way, either on almost maybe, and some individuals become an emergency because, and I'll share again some stories about that we see oftentimes happen. But certainly there are some services that are mandated. For example, our service and support administration, so we have to be able to provide, which for lack of a better term is a case management function. So we certainly have to be able to serve and provide that service. We also are mandated to do investigations, so investigations of abuse, neglect, things of that sort related for individuals with developmental disabilities in our community. So we have a team that does that. So, and then depending on that situation, we may have to work with local law enforcement. But there are some instances where we work with the provider or with the family to get those instances corrected, things of that sort. So again, I just wanted to share because this list is critical. And some of the things on this list, there are significant waiting lists for. So when we look at things like residential and day supports, that has especially when we're talking about off the Medicaid waiver system, that there are some pretty significant waiting lists that we're facing, which I shared in the last presentation with you all. Okay. What I wanted to do now is just take a few minutes, and like I said last time, I spent a lot of, I shared with you a lot about our numbers, our waiting list numbers, things of that sort. But what I'd like to do is share a couple of stories with you, and I'd like to kind of take a path along this road here, if we could, just to kind of share with you a little bit about how important and what these services mean. And I'm going to start at birth to 5. So I'm going to, if you would oblige me, and I'm going to have to read from this a little bit, but hopefully it'll resonate. I wanted to share a story about a little boy who was born with a heart condition, a single kidney that refluxed, nerve damage to the left side of his face, and taking methadone for fetal abstinence syndrome. He was born addicted to heroin. He is living with his grandparents, who now have custody of him, with periodic visits with his mother. The early intervention team, which is a team of professionals that actually work with families in our community, And they are professionals such as occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists. They go actually out and meet with families, and this is the story from one of them. The EI team started seeing him when he was 2 months old after being released from the NICU at Children's Hospital. He had had heart surgery at 7 months of age to repair his tricuspid atresia. He had delays in all areas of development. Initially, he had difficulty eating due to the nerve damage on his mouth, but slowly he learned to drink from a bottle. With his gross motor development delayed, he struggled with holding his head up, rolling, crawling, sitting up, and walking. He also had delays with fine motor skills. His hands were fisted, his arms were retracted, and he had a mild case of what's called torticollis. His neck was stuck leaning to one side. The EI staff worked with his grandmother on ways to best help this little boy overcome his delays. Today, the good news is that he is 20 months old. He's walking, running, climbing, maneuvering a variety of surfaces appropriate for his age. He gained the skill level needed to drink from straws, sippy cups, and open cups. He can now eat any type of food that he is given, and he has over 50 words. He is putting multiple words together to speak simple sentences. So our goal, certainly with the early childhood, early intervention services, is to get to the place here where this child is now. I mean, when you think about what he's going to have to overcome in terms of the things that he's been exposed to at a very early age. But our goal is to, with these services, is to be able to get in early, work with that child, work with the family in order to hopefully come to a place where maybe as we go down this road, that child may need fewer and fewer services depending on kind of how that works. So that's and if you noticed in this story, I really what kind of struck me about this story was the fact that, you know, we're talking about all the agencies, you know, that represent in Clermont County. You know, we're looking at a situation here where children's services, senior services living with the grandparents, you've got our services in place here to try and, you know, support this child, and then also the situation around the heroin issue. So I mean, it was kind of resonated with me in terms of what we're really looking at here, but in terms of what that means for this family. So it was very, it is something extremely important as we go down the road here to look at this particular story. Wanted to take the road a little bit further here. If you take it through school age and you get down to transition, I shared with you, I had an email from a mom who shared with me some things that how some of the services she's received recently have impacted her, and I'm just going to share that briefly. So a few years ago, I found myself a single parent. I contacted Clermont County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and they assisted me in receiving the Alternative Options Program, which is the program that I mentioned to you related to trying to get some help and services to families and individuals at a time of need where maybe you know, they might be on a waiting list, things of that sort, but what we can do to try and address some things right at the time that they need it. So this, due to safety reasons, my son is unable to stay by himself. This plan allows me to have a respite care provider when I'm working. It gives me peace of mind where I wouldn't have otherwise. In addition, I enrolled him in 3 sessions, a total of 9 months of very intensive neurological therapy called Brain Balance, which helped him mature mentally, physically, and verbally by 6 years. This was a benefit that was priceless. I couldn't be more grateful for the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity he was given. And then finally, he was then referred to what we called Bridges to Transition program, which was this summer, where kids get the opportunity to practice work and to be able to practice some work skills in the effort to then develop in order to, after they graduate, work in the community. He's excited. He participated in that program where he learned to work in the community, acquired new skills, and figured out what best fit him. He's excited to return again in the summer of 2016 to continue his goal of obtaining employment. My long-term objective is what every mother wants for her son, to have him be a happy, independent, employable, thriving adult. These services are helping me do just that. Without these programs, I have no idea what I've done or will do in the future. And finally, what I did want to share with you is as we take this road all the way through to adulthood, we get into the areas where aging, retirement, believe it or not, I can't even hardly believe it. It's coming up on a year now that I've been on the job in this particular role, which is hard to believe because it just time flies. So, and as I, certainly I've worked in the field for, I don't know, the better part of 23 years. You may not believe that, I don't. So, but the thing that struck me when you're in this role, certainly the stories, the things that you hear more acutely. One of the things that I think is that resonates with me is I've got two boys of my own. I've got a 15-year-old boy and an 11-year-old boy. They don't have any disabilities. They are healthy. They're happy. They other than driving me crazy a little bit every once in a while, I don't have to worry about a situation in which, when I lay my head down at night, are they going to have a seizure in the middle of the night? Is it a situation in which, I can barely get any sleep because I'm not sure if, he'll get up in the middle of the night and maybe wander somewhere that's unsafe. And the other thing that really it resonates with me, and it resonates me even more with me as I look at and I fill in this role, is the fact that I do believe someday those boys will move out. They will, I'm guessing, I'm hoping, they'll have a family of their own. They'll do those kinds of things. But when you look at the situations in which some of our families deal with on a daily basis in terms of caring for their adult loved one, in a situation where that just isn't feasible because of the fact that they can't live on their own. They would require immense support. And we just had a situation not too long ago where we have a high-risk team. We talk about different things that are happening as we hear about things. And certainly one of the things that, that came about recently was that caregiver, that family member died. And so in a situation where that happens, well, if there's not another family member in order to be able to care for that individual, then the system is in a place to have to look at, okay, well, what do we do to pick up and help that individual in a time where you think about that transition for a person without an intellectual disability, and then you think about that with a person with an intellectual disability and the trauma and the things that come about with that. And so, we recognize the fact that, that does happen, and it does happen in a situation where we have to move quickly to figure out, okay, what can we put in place for that individual because there really isn't anything else, or there may be some time or that some things with transition have to happen there. So, and we're anticipating that could be something that could be coming at a faster pace just because of where things stand with generationally. And so we're really keeping a close eye on that. So all those stories, I'm hoping, again, I shared with you some numbers last time around in July. I thought at this time, I wanted to share some stories with you just to kind of paint a little bit of a clearer picture as to what it is that, we're doing every day for the people in our county and recognizing some of those needs. So finally, this was a slide from in July, but our board had resolved to request, and we just met recently to resolve to request of the commissioners that the 0.4 mil levy originally passed in 1979 and the 1 mil levy passed in 1980 be put before the voters for replacement in next March's primary election. This would be one ballot issue combining these two levies going forward. Again, as I shared then, we're not asking for any new millage. We were just asking for the voters to replace these levies to today's effective rates. And by doing that, it would generate the revenue needed to certainly look at closing some of the things that we shared in the original slide with our forecasts and being able to look at responsibly, as I make a point in the next bullet point, responsibly address continued services and again, being good stewards, address waiting lists. It will also stabilize the financial outlook through the rest of this decade heading into the next. And then in the final bullet point there for the average homeowner, the additional cost would be about $56 a year or about $4.70.
Is that a $100,000 home or is that an average home?
We used census data, which was like about 160,000, I think, is kind of where however that shook out, so.
So this is $160,000.
Yeah, 160,000, yeah.
Okay.
Now, on the on replacement, you're on being replaced, you also want to just continue being continuing.
Yes, so these would be continuing, yes. Yeah, and that would be, because that would dramatically change the entire, yeah, there'd be, in terms of doing anything other than replacing, it would need to change as far as looking at putting it on any kind of operating cycle, that kind of thing.
So Dan, with the replacement, what is it currently? If it's gonna go to $56 a year for an average home today, what are they currently paying?
The average home today, I'm
Dave
not
knows
sure, do
that.
we have that data readily? Yeah.
Okay, that's important,
Sorry.
because that's the increase that people are gonna see.
So yes, we'll certainly get that for you.
There's no doubt that you all have probably one of the best, DDs in the state. And it's well known.
Yeah, we are very proud. We are accredited certainly by the state of Ohio, the Department of Developmental Disabilities, but we're also accredited by an organization called CARF, which is an organization kind of like an ISO organization, but for rehabilitation facilities. They come and visit us once every 3 years, and we've been accredited by that organization for the better part of 20 years. So it's something that we take, and that what they do is they essentially come in, look at all of the services, all the things related to policy procedures. So yes, we're very proud of our reputation in terms of what has meant in terms of not only in Clermont County, but as you mentioned, my predecessor Sharon was certainly, certainly well staked in some certain things happening at the state. I certainly try and do that as well. I'm on a few committees to address things not only locally but at the state level as well.
We're proud of you all too.
So, well, thank you.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.